Welcome to the Workflow online tutorial. I will show you in 5 simple steps how to create a workflow using Mio's Workflow Designer. The 5 steps in order are: Step 1. Create a workflow definition. Step 2. Design a sequence of nodes. Step 3. Assign transitions to link each node. Step 4. Assign configuration. Step 5. Validate the workflow. This process can be carried out for any workflow scenario that you choose. A workflow is an ordered sequence of tasks that are carried out to fulfill a business or technical process. Step 1. Creating a workflow definition. Select the new drop-down field from the navigation panel and select the object type of workflow definition. Assign a name, for example, OTT workflow, and a description to describe the workflow itself. Note that when this object type is enabled, these 2 fields can be referenced and indexed in Mio. Assign the visibility level of this object. Select Save. This will take you to the workflow definition summary page. Step 2. Design a sequence of nodes. Within the workflow definition page, select the Graph subtab. The Workflow Designer screen is where you create your workflow. Within this screen, what you see is what you get. The Workflow Designer page is split into 2 core areas. The Workflow Palette on the left-hand side of the page. Workflow Palette gives you the tools to create your own workflow, including structural nodes, transitions, user task nodes, and action nodes. The Workflow Canvas is where the workflow is built. The Workflow Control Bar provides general controls for managing your workflow. I will show you some of the main features of this bar as I talk you through creating a workflow. To begin with, select the Start node. This is known as a structural node and acts as a start and end point for the workflow. Left-hand mouse click on the Start icon, then left-hand mouse click on the main canvas. This will create the Start node. As this is a structural node, no configuration needs to be applied to it. If you want to rename this node, highlight the node itself by clicking on it and make the change in the name field at the bottom of the page. By hovering over the edge of a node, you have the ability to expand and reduce the size. Here's some helpful tips. Some of the panel components can be dragged out of the Workflow Designer to allow more space for the workflow canvas. Once dragged out, the panel will float above the Workflow Designer. Such panels can be docked with the Workflow Designer again by dragging them to their original location. Select the Pop-out button. This feature allows you to pop the entire Workflow Designer out of the web browser to provide more screen space. Click again and it will pop the Workflow Designer back into place. The Snap Grid button. This shows a grid over the workflow canvas to make it easier to align nodes and transitions both horizontally and vertically. When the grid is enabled, your nodes will be snapped to the nearest horizontal and vertical line in the grid. The Drag Select allows you to isolate areas of your workflow to work on. By selecting this button and dragging over your chosen nodes, you can highlight multiple areas to modify. Step 3. Assign transitions to link each node. Nodes are connected to one another using transitions. This can be found by left-hand mouse clicking on the transition icon at the top of the page. Left-hand mouse click on the node that you want to assign the transition from and drop it by executing a left-hand mouse click on the node you want to move it to. This has now linked the 2 nodes. You may want to play around with how the transitions can be extended to help create your workflow. By selecting the midpoint of the transition to see the dot, you can drag the transition into various directions. When a transition is created, it also creates a description by default. The wording can be modified by selecting the description and changing the name field at the bottom of the page. Alternatively, you may choose to delete it. This can be done by either highlighting the description and right-hand mouse clicking, or you can select the description and select the delete icon at the top of the page, whatever is easier for you. Now carry out this same process for each node you want to create. I will show you an example of how this same process can be applied to other nodes. Step 4. Assigning configuration. Once you have created all your nodes, you can now assign the configuration to each node. You can always do this as you create each node, but I would suggest you plot out all the nodes you want to create, then assign the configuration to them as a second step in the process. Highlight the node you want to assign the action plugin or configuration to, and right-hand mouse click. Then select the configuration. Step 5. Validate your workflow. Once you are happy with your workflow, select the validation button. Any errors will be displayed as warnings in the canvas and described in the Error tab at the bottom of the screen. If the validation is successful, you will have the option to save it. If not, you will be required to make the relevant changes. Have a go at creating a workflow yourself using these 5 simple steps.